Live streaming also.
All right, so good morning to everyone out there. Welcome to the Sacramento CleanTech Showcase. For those of you that are in our meeting, I'm going to drop a link to where the live stream is. If you want to feed it out to the world so they can see what's happening in Sacramento, please do. I am Thomas Hall, Executive Director of CleanStart, and welcome to Sacramento's CleanTech Showcase, innovations to drive carbon-free power. I want to remind everyone to stay on mute when you're not talking. Our agenda for today is the welcomes, which I'm doing right now. Then we have a keynote address by Paul Lau, CEO and General Manager of SMUD, followed by the State of CleanTech by Thomas Hall, Executive Director of CleanStart. I hope he shows up. Then a panel discussion on getting the most from the customer side, innovation and efficiency and electrification, and a second panel discussion on innovations in supply, renewables, storage, and microgrids. Now, first, I want to say the CleanTech Showcase is brought to you by CleanStart and Startup SAC. I'm Thomas Hall from CleanStart. We also have Gary Simon, founder of CleanStart, and the co-founders of Startup SAC, Laura Good and Jeff Bennett here. We've worked together on a lot of things, and this is one of our most exciting collaborations. A big thank you to Startup SAC's annual sponsors, SMUD, Witten Law, Binder Insurance, Stoll Reeves, Weintraub Tobin, Moneta, Holcomb Law, Clifton Larson and Allen, and EY. And a big thank you to CleanStart sponsors and supporting partners of Hacker Lab, that's actually where I am right now, Reverent, Moss Adams, Blue Tech Valley, SMUD, Greenberg Traurig, Weintraub Tobin, Symbio, and Fresno State. Both sets of our sponsors are here to support the community. So if you want to reach out to any of them and connect, they have resources to help you grow in Sacramento. Now, a word from our platinum sponsor, SMUD. And people start moving frantically if you can't hear the sound.
SMUD presents Clean Power City Champions.
I want to live in a clean power city. That's why I drive an electric vehicle.
I want to live in a clean power city because I want to help stop the climate change.
We want to live in a clean power city
because we want our first child to inherit a better world.
Let's create a clean power city.
And join the charge to a cleaner future.
Join the charge.
Learn how you can join the charge with SMUD at cleanpowercity.org.
All right, thank you, SMUD, for supporting this. And now I'd like to welcome our keynote address, Paul Lau, Executive Office, CEO and General Manager of SMUD. As CEO, Paul leads the 6th largest community-owned utility in the nation, serving a population of 1.5 million residents and managing a 1.7 million budget. He's a 40-year veteran of SMUD and has held several other leadership positions, most recently Chief Grid Strategy and Operations Officer. He has been the principal driver behind SMUD's zero carbon goal. And SMUD, some of the lowest rates in the state, if I'm correct. Please welcome Paul Lau.
Thank you so much, Thomas, for the warm welcome. And really thank you, to CleanStart and Startup SAC for organizing today's Sacramento CleanTech Showcase. We're really excited to be here. As you bring regions, innovators, startups, and others together to connect, share ideas, and discuss clean tech and opportunity for innovation. We have SMUD staff here today, and I know they're excited to hear the conversation and ideas during the panel and other discussions. And I'll share, contact information at the end of the presentation about how you can stay in touch and share innovation, innovative clean energy ideas with SMUD. Now, it's never more important for us to support entrepreneur innovators and new ideas. You may have seen the headlines a couple of weeks ago about the UN's report on climate change. In short, the UN Secretary General insists that unless governments everywhere reassess their energy policy, the world will be uninhabitable. Now, you're probably all familiar with Simon Sinek and his book, Start With Why, and his popular TED Talk on the same topic. Now, if the UN Secretary General assessment isn't a compelling why, I don't know what is. Now, recognizing there wasn't another minute to waste, at SMUD, we drew a clear line in the sand in the fight against climate change in 2021. Our clean energy vision is driven by the compelling why of the devastating impacts of climate change. And we see innovation as an important part of how we'll deliver our bold decarbonization goal. Now, before I get started, or get ahead of myself, I'd like to start with a quick refresher on a few basics about SMUD. Next slide, please. Now, first, I'll begin, really with SMUD. We're a community-based and not-for-profit organization. That means our customers and our communities are at the heart of everything that we do. Now, keeping the lights on and rates affordable has always been the two most important things to our customers. But they also expect us to be responsible stewards of the environment. And in fact, when our customers are aware of a clean energy vision, 90% of them support our goal. So that's the recap. Let's dive in. Next slide, please. Now, SMUD has a strong history of environmental leadership. We set renewable goals that predated and among the most aggressive of any state mandates. SMUD was the first California utility to have 20% of our energy comes from renewable resources. We launched the first community solar programs in the nation, and we continue to accelerate our environmental commitments as effects of climate change becomes clearer each year. We've seen firsthand the lengthy droughts and the rampant wildfires in our own backyard. Now, being community-owned means we frame the problem in a local light. Here's a couple of data points that makes our why even more compelling. Sacramento is ranked the 6th most polluted city in the country, based on the days of unhealthy and unsafe level of air pollution in the ozone layer. Sacramento's childhood asthma rates are unacceptably high. Our children are 22% more likely to suffer from asthma than the average American kid. This is just not acceptable. I introduced our 2030 clean energy vision when I became CEO in late 2020. It builds on our board's climate emergency declarations from July 2020, which challenged the organizations and the region to do everything possible to accelerate carbon reduction. And one of our board members, Rosanna Herbert, is among the audience today, and I want to thank her for her vision. Now, our vision is to become a powerful partner for inclusive zero carbon economy. Our goal is absolute zero in our power supply by 2030, which is the most ambitious carbon reduction goal of any large utility in the United States. But it's not zero carbon at all costs. This vision is anchored in maintaining our world-class reliability and affordable rates. And in fact, I think we last looked, our rate is about 45% cheaper than our neighbor if you live in PG&E territory. But it's also an inclusive vision. Zero carbon goal is an open invitation to others to partner with SMUD because we can't reach zero on our own. We're also approaching this bold goal through an equity lens to ensure that no community are left behind. Our approach is holistic, improving air quality benefits, the environment, public health, water quality, and much more. Now, broader than SMUD's power supply, our operations and investments in electrification of building and transportation, because we cannot actually talk about carbon without talking about two of the biggest sectors that contribute to carbon, which is building and transportation electrifications. We can't afford to waste any time on this. We owe it to our children and our grandchildren, our community, our environment, and we owe it to ourselves to really seize the moment. We can't get to zero alone, as I said before, but we've set a very large table with an open invitation to others to partner with us on this important journey. And we have the opportunity to showcase Sacramento as the place where clean tech business wants to be. That is so important. Next slide, please. Now, next I'll talk a little bit about our zero carbon plan. Staff actually translated the vision into our zero carbon plan in a record-breaking in just 5 months. The plan is aggressive yet flexible roadmap to reach zero carbon by 2030. It focuses on four main areas. The first is natural gas generation retirement and retooling. With reliability at the foundation of our plan, this work includes extensive reliability studies. We conducted reliability studies last year, which showed we can close 2 of the 5 gas-fired plants by 2025 and retooling or refueling the other 3. Now we plan to do hot layup the plants. We'll retire to make sure we help ease the stress on the broader California grid if needed. Now the second is proven clean technology. These are resources like wind, solar, geothermal, hydro, biomass, short duration battery storage, electrification, and demand response. Now, the things currently are in our portfolio, and we expect to get 90% of the way there with those proven technology. Now, we'll expand renewable and battery storage resources by 3.5 times. And we're on track to add more than 3,000 megawatts of new renewables and storage, including 1,155 megawatts by 2025. Now, this clean energy resources we have planned by 2025 are enough to offset to production from the 2 gas-fired plants that we plan to retire. Now, as you can see on the slide, the first 2 work stream accounts for about $2.5 billion in investments. Now, the third is new technology and business models and potential partnerships. We'll identify new technology and business model options, including work with partners in researching, piloting, and possibly bringing new technologies to scale. Now, this will help us identify potential partnerships and business models like virtual power plant and launch pilot projects and programs to test and prove new and emerging technology and develop paths for prioritizing technology adoptions and scaling. And we're particularly interested in hydrogen and methane, long duration energy storage, such as flow batteries and compressed air storage. Now, this aren't ready to scale yet, but really holds great potentials to replace natural gas generations, which will help us close that last 10% gap on the road to zero. And we plan to invest about $2 billion in new technology and business model through 2030. Now, the final work stream is our financial and regulatory strategy. This work focuses on estimated cost ranges and associated rate impacts. And we're also looking at potential alternative revenue sources, such as partnership and grant. In fact, I was just at DC a couple of weeks ago working with DOE to really look at where's the best places for SMUD to partner with our communities to try to get access some of those $6 billion of grant that will be available. Now, investment schedules for expanding our existing clean technology and research and portfolio and pilot options are also part of this work. Now, it's easy to see how innovation and partnership will play a pivotal role in all 4 of the major work streams. And we're always looking for new and emerging new technologies. And we have had a robust research and development program for many, many years. Now, we know there are technologies out there that aren't quite market ready now, but they show great promise for the future. Now, our arms are open for startups and entrepreneurs to join us with the cutting edge strategies, working emerging clean tech spaces, new business models, and partnerships. We can put Sacramento on the map as a place for green business to thrive. I think the California Mobility Center, which we just had a grand 1-year anniversary celebration a couple of weeks ago, is an example of this kind of creative thinking. Now, SMUD is a founding member of the California Mobility Center, whose mission is to develop an innovation hub for clean mobility, creating an environment and support systems for startups and established mobility company to collaborate on advanced techniques that will accelerate the adoption of clean mobility technology. And the California Mobility Center provides an atmosphere where clean mobility startups can grow and drive new business opportunities and economic developments to communities that have often been left out. Now, in addition to economic development and job creation, the center also focused on job readiness. SMUD, the center, and other partners to provide job readiness and technical training to hundreds of people so far, and to prepare them for careers in the clean mobility sector. So we're thinking much more broadly technology when we talk about innovation at SMUD. Is inclusive workforce and economic development is a big part of it, along with making sure we're bringing everyone along in a zero carbon journey. Now, in 2021, SMUD joined the governor's office, SEC-RT, the City of Sacramento, and the Cal EPA and private investors, Giddy Up EV, a private investor, to launch an e-mobility hub with one of the largest fast charging stations on the West Coast, located in historically under-resourced communities. This e-mobility hub will also provide access to electric rideshare options for this community. So technology is only part of the solutions. We also need creative and groundbreaking solutions for our community's social well-being. And this includes ideas that provide access to health services and education. So I want to emphasize, no solutions off the table. As I said before, we have set a very, very large table. Next area, please. So I could talk all day probably about all the exciting things we've been going on in SMUD. I'll focus on broad priorities so you understand the kinds of technology and programs we're looking at. And I'll share progress so far and our priorities for the year ahead. That's not on the slide, but it's a good snapshot of our key focus area. Bold goals drive innovations, and why we've said no ideas off the table, we don't have a boundless pit of resources. So we need to focus the team at SMUD on the key things that will help us make progress. Now, we've spent a lot of time after we launched the Clean Energy Division getting very specific about the type of technologies we believe holds the most promise, so we could focus on investments and staff resources in those areas, while recognizing there are sure to be technologies and other solutions to help us get to zero that we aren't even aware of yet. Now, this slide gives you a broad idea of what we focus on, particularly in the technology space, on our journey to zero carbon. Now, most of those areas hold significant opportunities for partnerships. There are also areas where we're pursuing grants and other funding to help offset the cost of our plan to ensure we keep the rates affordable. Now, there's always a degree of risk when you invest in new emerging technologies, and we know there are literally billions of dollars available at the state and federal level that will help utilities and other business harness these new technologies and de-risk the investment to a certain degree. Next slide, please. So next, I'll talk about some of the 2021 highlights and 2022 priorities. Now, our board approved the SMUD Zero Carbon Plan on April 28, 2021, and we made a lot of progress in less than a year. We've completed extensive reliability studies, developed pilot and customer programs, completed studies into alternative fuels and storage options. We did extensive customer outreach, built awareness and support for our plans locally and nationally. I had the opportunity to testify in Congress about the benefit of our plan. And in December, Energy Secretary Granholm visited SMUD to see our new utility scale battery storage project and learn about our CleanTech for workforce development and programs. We also solidified some important partnerships. Our 4-agency partnership is developing comprehensive regional funding priorities for zero emissions vehicle development in the Sacramento region. And our work with the California Mobility Center is helping us bring new electric commercial Zeus trucks into our fleet and grow adoptions in California and beyond. An accomplishment I think is particularly relevant to today's discussion is the development of a formal innovation process at SMUD. Getting to zero is to take innovation in many areas of our business, from new technology to reimagined relationships with our customers to optimizing processes to free up money to fund our investments. Now today, we have a formal and mature process for inviting, evaluating, and pursuing innovative ideas from our employees. The process began less formally last year when we invited SMUD employees to submit innovative ideas about new technology or business model online. And a new formed innovation leadership team reviewed the submissions, and several made them into our zero carbon plan. We broadened the process beyond just zero carbon and has been formalized and matured significantly in recent months. Today, we have a formal idea hub on our intranet where employees can submit ideas on any topic. and we invite all ideas, big and small. There's clear evaluation criteria which a team from across SMUD used to evaluate and prioritize ideas and get them into production with support from the relevant subject matter experts. It's in its early days, but we're pursuing several ideas submitted by employees, including using virtual reality goggles and technologies in our training programs at the Sacramento Power Academy. And we're hoping to expand the portal to be external facing so people outside of SMUD can submit ideas. In the meantime, Heidi Pyle, who works with our innovation partners like Startup Sac and Clean Start, is the point of contact for submitting formal proposals, ideas, and we'll get them to our zero carbon team. I'll share Heidi's contact information at the end of the presentations. I know many of you have had existing relationship with member of the SMUD team, and I encourage you to continue a conversation with them to learn more about our zero carbon work. But please connect with Heidi on any proposals so we can consider them through our innovation process. Now look what's ahead for 2022. We're continuing to dig deeper into reliability assessments and finalizing plans for the retirement of the 2 gas-fired plants by the end of 2025. We'll be doing targeted and in-depth research on long-duration energy storage based on studies we completed in 2021. And this work will help us determine next steps in terms of pilots. We're keeping a very close eye on the development of alternative fuels for potential use in our other gas-fired plants. We're moving forward with the procurement process for several solar and storage projects. And we're on track to bring 1,155 megawatts of new renewables and battery storage online by 2025, which is enough to power 300,000 homes and offset the retirement of the 2 gas-fired plants. Now, the work with our customers to deeply understand their needs will continue, particularly among our hard-to-reach segments. Now, this includes continuing our Zero Carbon Virtual Forum, where customers can hear the latest about our progress, as well as listening sessions and targeted focus groups where we get direct input on what matters most to our customers. And their feedback really helps us make sure that we are offering programs that are relevant and valuable to all our customers to help them all be a part of getting our regions to zero carbon. Now, we have a lot of work, from a program standpoint to support decarbonization. Now, one new set of program we'll be launching, testing, and looking forward to expand is to build out our virtual power plant resource, which is in partnership with our partners. Now, SMUD will provide incentives and options for customers to participate in programs that allow us and them to share values for their distributed energy resources and technologies, such as smart thermostats, battery storage systems, electric vehicles, and other devices. Now, the goal is to provide low flexibility and low management resources that can be tapped into when needed to help balance the grid and minimize the need for additional generation or to offset fossil fuel generation during specific times. Now, electrification of vehicles and buildings are a major focus of a zero carbon plan because these are the 2 of the largest carbon emitting sectors in California. In the electric vehicle space, we focus on research and development and program development for managed charging solutions to mitigate the potential grid impacts from EV charging. We're launching pilots to investigate residential managed charging options, working with vehicle manufacturers and aggregators, and exploring vehicles to home and vehicle to grid technologies for light, medium, and heavy duty electric vehicles. In fact, I'm going down next Wednesday to sign, to do an MOU signing with Secretary Granholm in LA, in terms of how do you actually make sure the utilities and, the OEMs and the customers is part of that solution when we actually look at vehicle to grid charging. Now, we expect this area to see a lot of innovation and technology advancement over the short term, and we're looking forward to partnering with others to help us move more quickly in this space. We believe there's a significant role for utilities like SMUD to focus on supporting installation of charging infrastructure in a way that makes the customer experience simple and timely, minimizes grid impacts, and optimizes grid infrastructure investments. We know technology is making it easier for our customer to adopt climate-friendly technologies. There are instant rebates in the smart energy store for things like smart thermostats, and customer can find electricians through our websites to install the EV chargers. Now, EVs are perfect examples of the evolution of the customer utility relationships, with technology and digitalization playing an important role. Now, customers are used to fueling their vehicles whenever they need to, based on what's convenient for their schedule and travel pattern. Now, we've incentivized EV adoption for many years, but the relationship has been to hand over a check after the customer purchase an EV. We need to evolve from what's basically a financial transaction into an active partnership. Today, there's about 22,000 electric vehicles in the SMUD service territory, and SMUD's share of EVs needed by 2030 is 300,000. The proliferation of charging infrastructure needed to support this growth and the potential grid impacts makes it easy to see why a closer utility customer partnership is necessary, and technology is going to be a major enabler. Now, the partnership with our customer is going to be critical to tapping into the stored energy in all those electric vehicles for vehicle to grid, vehicle to home, and vehicle to business applications. Now, this stored energy is an important potential resource for utility to tap into for increased renewable integrations and grid resiliency. But the partnership requires mutual understanding of the value propositions, how the energy can be used, and why utility needs that energy. And digitalization can help make that easier for both the customer and the utility. But it must be done in a way that's easy for customers and make financial sense for both parties. So growing a portfolio of customer resources can offset the need for some utility scale solutions, which have longer lead time, considering permitting and building timelines. But growing customer resources also take time. The earlier we can build this partnership, the better. And we're really excited about the journey ahead. So next slide, please. So we're on an important, exciting new journey to zero. And I see organizations such as Clean Start, Startup SAC, and your members placed as important partners. There's several ways small businesses can engage with SMUD as we head down to zero carbons road in a zero emissions vehicles, of course. Now, the first is a sign up for our SEED or Small Business Incentive Programs. If you haven't already, SEED stands for Supplier Education Economic Development, and the program gives preference in contracting opportunities to certify small businesses. The SMUD board established a target that says 20% of our contracting business go to SEED qualified small businesses. You can also register online to be notified of contracting opportunities. You see the relevant web, email, and phone details on the slide. And we encourage you to stay in the loop by signing up to incentive notifications at cleanpowercity.org. We'll let you know when the board is discussing the zero carbon plan. I think staying in touch with our SMUD staff and send any ideas you'd like us to consider to Heidi. Her email address is on the screen. Now, in closing, I'll leave you with a reminder that SMUD has always set bold goals, and we have a track record for achieving them. And bold goals drives innovation. And I think SMUD, our customer, our community, and our region are better for it. You know, in February, I celebrated 40 years working at SMUD. And I can say I'm more excited and energized by the work we're doing now than any other time in my career. And in fact, I will say this is the first time that my kids are actually interested in what their dad is doing at work. So thank you for being on this important journey with us. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any of your questions.
Well, thank you very much. Round of applause from everybody out there for such a tremendous overview of what's going on. So it's an exciting time to be in Sacramento.
You have questions?
Yes, it is.
If you have questions for Paul, put them in the chat. Yeah, and we'll make sure that that we can get to them and answer them. And we're gonna now, I guess, go on with. All right. Thank you very much, Paul. Now we're more onto our path. Sorry. I was taking notes on everything that Paul said because it was really exciting hearing about their commitment to, zero carbon and engaging the community around entrepreneurship and innovation. Now, I guess I'd like to welcome myself, Thomas Hall, Executive Director of Clean Start. And I'm going to give you guys the state of clean tech in the Sacramento area. So SMUD certainly just detailed their ambitious plan to reach zero carbon by 2030. And I want everyone to kind of note that's not net zero, that's zero carbon, which goes beyond a lot of the other pledges that you hear. So with aggressive goals like SMUD's and our growing ecosystem of clean tech companies, we have an opportunity. We have activity, we have successes, we have human capital here at Sacramento. If we work together and collaborate, we can do even more. We can capitalize on the clean tech sector of growth. Now, back in 2005, Clean Start set the goal to build the region as a clean tech hub, a region large enough to create a virtuous cycle of growth. That's where we attract investment, build companies, and those companies spin out new companies. To reach that, we set a goal of $5 billion in revenue and 10,000 jobs for the region, for the clean tech region. In 2005, we identified just 31 companies that really fell into that clean tech area. Now, for the past years, I have been updating this, documenting, cataloging, connecting, calling, faxing, texting, every clean tech company that I could identify in Sacramento, find out, what are they doing? How many employees do they have? What revenue are they generating right here? This is part of our progress report that we do every couple of years to update the progress on how we are as a region towards our goal of 10,000 jobs and $5 billion in revenue. And what I found is deals are up. The ecosystem is robust, and we have over 100 companies standing by to make a difference. That we have 4.3 billion in revenue, 9,900 jobs in careers at innovative clean tech companies, developing and manufacturing clean tech solutions. These companies are innovative with scalable solutions. They're the drivers of growth, but they're also just part of the ecosystem that includes resellers, retailers, and professional services delivering solutions. This makes Sacramento strong with its clean tech community. And our clean tech community is at an advantage is in a position to take advantage of growing investment. Global investment in the energy transition is accelerating. Nearly $1 trillion was invested in clean tech in 2021. That's up $400 billion since 2018. In the first half of 2021, $80 billion was invested in climate tech startups. Climate tech startups now get 14% of venture capital money. This is our moment. This is why we've been collaborating to build the clean tech hub in Sacramento here. Local companies have been able to take advantage of this growing demand and investment in clean tech. This is the beginning of that virtuous cycle that I mentioned and talked about. Regional companies are getting that investment. Since 2019, 1.95 billion has been invested in companies that started here, companies that were nurtured and grew here. That, for kind of perspective, that 1.95 billion is more than all the VC investment in clean tech globally in 2003. Companies are getting attention. Regional companies now have attracted national and international investors. They've formed corporate partners. They're growing. In addition, of those 9,900 jobs, 6,000 of them are in manufacturing. That was one of the things that surprised me. Manufacturing is growing in this region in clean tech. Now, to keep our region innovative, we need to keep supporting companies. And we have a very diverse set of companies in our region when it comes to technology and what stage of growth they're in. About 39% of our companies are still in or climbing out of the valley of death. That's where they're still trying to get to that commercialized stage where they can, or that point where they can still, or that point when they can get revenue to become self-sustaining. About 15% of all the companies could be considered nascent technologies for clean tech. And we need to support these companies to climb out of that valley of death through commercialization and validate their technology. And it's important that we approach all of them. In the second half of 2020 and first half of 2021, about 66% of climate tech investment went to mobility and transportation, which is great. It's a mark of sector of maturity. But we need an ecosystem that's going to grow for the long term and address all the solutions in decarbonization. To reach zero carbon globally, the IEA reported 50% of the global reductions needed to reach net zero by 2050 rely on technologies currently in that demonstration or prototype phase. This is why we need to continue to support early stage, pre-seed, and seed stage companies. This is where we drive the innovation, drive growth, and build the ecosystem. Now, we connect that ecosystem with over 100 companies, nearly 10,000 people working. We take action, we enable that virtuous cycle through collaboration. I want to highlight and reemphasize what Paul was talking about the outreach they're going to be doing to the community. Make sure you stay involved and connected with that, because we're going to bring it all together. SMUD's aggressive zero carbon plan. Also, our communities with climate emergency declarations at the city and county levels. Community groups are pushing for electrification in building and transportation. Companies wanting to demonstrate to shareholders and customers they're making serious commitments to greenhouse gas reductions have announced net zero goals. This trend will only continue as policymakers, utilities, and industries are doubling down, demanding clean tech innovations. And we are well positioned for that. We have 100 companies here that are standing by to unleash their innovation and support the energy transition. Now, how do we all get involved? Connect with the community, invest in the relationships that support clean tech innovation, the relationships between startups and the community, between entrepreneurs and SMUD, between research institutions and entrepreneurs and business development. Look for projects entrepreneurs can apply their creativity and talents to locally, community energy projects, education, and access. All these things, you can harness the creativity and support of entrepreneurs with the community to build Sacramento as a stronger region. This is how we continue the virtuous cycle. As we saw with solar, and if we work together and leverage our resources, Sacramento can continue to be a clean tech leader. So if you want to start helping us build this virtuous cycle, start with Clean Start, connect with Startup Sac, and engage with some of the entrepreneurs that you'll hear from shortly on the panel led by Gary Simon. And thank you very much. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Gary Simon to lead our panel discussion.
Well, thank you very much, Thomas. Boy, it's just an exciting time for innovative startups and others who want to help lead the way to a clean energy future. Make our region a model for the rest of the country to follow. It's a good time for innovators to commercialize their ideas, as you've just laid out, in terms of, we probably never had a better climate for accessing startup money, getting across the valley of death, and getting companies to success. The stars are really aligning. So what we're going to do now is turn to two panel discussions. And the first one is looking at the customer side of the equation, innovations and efficiency and electrification that will help achieve the goals that SMUD is talking about. And in any showcase that tries to deal with just 10 companies, you have to realize there's probably 10 times more ideas and companies that are out there. But this is a great place to start. I'll remind you that you can use chat to put questions in for us to put to the panel. We're giving each panelist an introduction opportunity to talk about how things are going in their area. And I'll tell the panelists that you may get a general reminder from Jeff Bennett that you've got a minute to go. But we do want to get through everybody's presentation and leave time for discussion. So we've got 5 expert panels this morning. I'm very pleased that they've agreed to talk. We're going to start with Rick Wiley, who's the president of Valara Building Systems, and has been involved in improving building energy performance for decades here in the Sacramento area, and has been leading his company itself to become an innovator with new products and solutions for customers. So let me turn it over to you, Rick, to sort of take us through where you see the biggest gains to be made in the building sector and what we could do there. So let's welcome Rick Wiley.
Thank you, Gary. We're going to have my slides.
Yeah, we
You should be able to show your slides, yes.
Do you want me to show them?
Thomas needs to stop sharing.
Okay. Let me see here, share screen.
Here you go.
All right. From beginning. All right, well, thank you again, Gary, and happy to be here today, and I'll try to walk through these pretty quickly. So the way Velara sees energy efficiency 2022 and beyond. First off, as Gary indicated, decades of great work in our whole industry and in energy efficiency measures, kind of the true building blocks of building better homes. Starting with things like the building envelope, obviously the insulation, the ceilings and walls, windows, dual pane, low E, infiltration control, tightening up the homes and putting in mechanical ventilation, HVAC duct systems, big area of effort, insulated and airtight, verified airflow, verified leakage, low leakage, I should say, and fan watts, huge improvements in the last number of years. And then obviously efficient appliances and lighting. Those are kind of basic tools that are always valuable, but we're seeing a big pivot in all of the utilities, all of the everything we're talking about today is all about decarbonization or electrification. And if we're going to remove the carbon footprint, we're going to have to deal with removing the carbon. So that's something that Velara is working very hard in our role in the industry. We know we've got a part to play, and all about the electrified home. And the way we see that is it's a rooftop solar, it's a 20-year battery, we'll talk about that, integrated space and water heat pump system for space heating, space cooling, and water heating. Those are the elements we see are critical. So let's first start VillaGrid. We've developed a home battery system. This is using a much different chemistry, battery chemistry, lithium titanate. It's the world's safest chemistry. It's totally fire resistant. It is the most efficient. It is in both the watts in. You put in a watt, you're going to get out 0.97 watts. So very efficient storage and charge discharge. It's the most rapid charging and discharging battery available, highest capacity. Big deal is the 20-year warranty. That's critical for us. We felt like homes need something a little longer than a 10-year battery. So that's the reason we got involved with this. And it's ready, and we've just moved into our new production facility just a few weeks ago, getting ready to ramp up, and we're ready to do so. Here's a picture of one of our installations up in Turkey Creek and Lincoln Hills. The next big component of our systems is the Aquatherm Air integrated heat pump system. And again, the biggest users of electricity, or gas, I should say, in a home are the gas furnace and the gas water heater. And everybody is working hard to find, both for new homes, a replacement system of moving to all electric, and then replacements for existing homes. So our Aquatherm Air System, we've really been working with Carrier, and we've just installed our first working system in Davis as part of a PGE UC Davis Frontier Energy Monitoring installation.
1 minute left.
We're ready to roll this out very soon. The major benefits of this system is it's integrated space heating, space cooling, and water heating. And what it provides is the water heating is going to be a recovery that's similar to a gas water heater, about an hour to recover, whereas a typical hot water heat pump is a 7-hour recovery cycle. And the other huge benefit is it removes the defrost cycle from the homeowner's discomfort. Instead of turning on the air conditioner when your heater is running to try to de-ice the coils, we avoid that with this integrated system. So those are the systems we're very excited to bring to the marketplace, working with utilities like SMUD, PGE, all the others, California Energy Commission, and the PUC. So that's what I have.
Well, that's terrific. So just one question, is the heat pump an air-to-air heat exchanger, or is there a ground source option with an installation?
It is an air-to-air heating system today. We've got down the road plans to turn it into both air-to-air and ground loop. But initially, we're using right off the shelf high efficiency heat pump systems from Carrier that brings the production availability and the price point into an affordable range.
All right, thank you very much. I mean, so many things you're doing there are exactly, I think, what SMUD will be looking for in meeting its goals. And another big area, we'll turn to our next speaker with Lucid Optics. Sergey, I think I'm right in saying that lighting is still one of the biggest energy users and one of the bigger contributors to heat load within a building that must be removed. And you've been working on innovations in lighting for a number of years, and you've got some very clever things to offer in terms of drop-in replacements for the existing fluorescent fixtures. So welcome this morning. And Sergey, if you could take us through your ideas on how we can improve lighting in the typical building and make it more efficient.
Sure. Thank you very much, Gary. Can you see my slide?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So I'm Sergey Vasilyev, founder and CEO of Lucid Optics. We are developing energy efficient, thin and flexible LED lighting sheets to replace basically the old mainstream lighting fixtures employing fluorescent tubes. Why is this important? Well, lighting of our buildings consumes approximately 16% of the total electricity in the US. It is literally hundreds of terawatt hours of electricity annually. More than half of all lighting fixtures in commercial buildings use fluorescent tubes, more than 1 billion of them. They're outdated, inefficient, and tend to produce poor light quality with a choppy spectrum and flickering. Fluorescent tubes also contain mercury and often end up in landfills, poisoning the environment. The LED technology in general provides a much more energy efficient and environmentally friendly alternative. However, despite all of the advancements in the LEDs and huge positive changes in the consumer attitude and legislative efforts, fluorescent fixtures still dominate commercial buildings with the LED penetration of only 20% in the office space, for example. Why is this transition going so slow? One reason is the still high cost of the LED replacement fixtures. The other reason is the lack of attractive visual differentiation. The LED fixtures often take exactly the same old forms as the incumbent fluorescents they're intended to replace. And all this makes it much harder for the customers to justify the replacement for the energy saving reasons alone. So the solution we have come up with is a very thin and flexible LED lighting panel. It is about 50% more energy efficient than fluorescent sources and provides much higher light quality, new design opportunities, and better aesthetics. So the panel features lower weight and cost, and is also easier in handling and installation compared to the traditional LED lighting fixtures. While this technology is still in development, we are already working on establishing a sustainable domestic manufacturing base here in Sacramento. The production will be using extremely small amounts of raw materials and energy, and virtually no water or harsh chemicals. We already made our pilot product, which marked the world's first thin and flexible lighting panel. And it was recognized by the Illuminating Engineering Society as a unique and significant advancement to the art and science of lighting. So to sum up, we see this technology as an ideal candidate for replacing the fluorescent lights on a grand scale. This can be done through either drop-in replacements, through retrofits, or by creating completely new lighting designs. Doing so could reduce the lighting energy consumption by half, avoid tens of million tons of carbon emissions, and save billions of dollars in energy costs on the annual basis. So with all that said, we're still on an early stage of commercialization. Our current customers are mostly companies that develop their own products, ranging from lighting devices to illuminated signage and electronic displays.
1 minute left.
Some of the challenges we are facing in targeting the mainstream illumination markets and going to scale include finding ways to demonstrate our products and their benefits, performance, and reliability in the relevant environment, in actual buildings. And this is where we are hoping to find partners and get feedback from the potential customers and industry stakeholders. Therefore, I would really like to take this opportunity to encourage any inquiries and collaboration in this area. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Sergey. I mean, the drop-in is, as you say, it's lightweight. It really doesn't change anything that you have to do in the fixture. It's a plug-in. So where are you seeing it being used now? Have you gotten penetration in the market in the fluorescents, or are you more in the signage area?
Yeah, so initially our customers, as I said, are the ones that are developing their own products. They're typically like architectural solutions and signage, as I mentioned. Yeah, and this is where we're seeing like more demand at our small production rate. And so, but on the other hand, this is the perfect niche for us to explore first, because this is where the cost advantages can be verified, and the performance can be also be validated for like long-term operation. So we have not yet released any product for replacing the fluorescent lights, because that would require competing with the existing solutions, which are mainstream solutions, and which where we have to compete head-to-head with the entrenched established market players like Philips, for example, General Electric, and so on.
Well, that sounds like a good point to work with SMUD on getting some demos here in the area where you might have a leg up by being local. So thank you very much, Sergey. Great stuff. We're going to turn now to two presentations which really introduce what Paul was talking about of leaving no communities behind. A lot of the technologies that we talk about are often expensive. They require a lot of capital investment upfront, and a lot of communities just can't do that. So they're not participating in the transition the way that we would like. So the first of these presentations, we're going to turn to Bob Gimmerin, who is the CEO and founder of a company called Off the Wall Energy, a great name. You should patent that, trademark it anyway. But Paul, you've got a very different approach on how customers could install storage to their advantage in a way that's not so expensive and gives a lot of flexibility to renters to move the equipment around versus hanging something on the wall. So, Bob, please tell us more about your innovations for this off-the-wall storage.
Thank you, Gary. I want to thank Thomas and Laura for helping set this panel up. You folks do, over the years, you do a lot of work, and it's really, you should be commended for what you do for the Sacramento community. So what we do at Off the Wall Energy is quite different. It's a different approach. So our product is a lightweight, portable energy storage device. So it's meant to be set on a tabletop or a counter on an entertainment center, and you plug it into the wall, and then you plug your devices into this unit. It's much like a smart power strip or something that is. It has an internal battery systems in it. It's limited in what it does, but has some very important capabilities. It's priced well below the thousands of dollars that you would pay for a wall-mounted, garage-mounted system like a Tesla Powerwall. But it has the capability to keep a home entertainment center or your major appliances like a refrigerator, keep them working when the grid goes down or there's a power outage that occurs. It has the ability to bring in energy when it's cheap and to use that energy when grid power is more expensive. At the same time, it can work with the utilities, so utilities can send a command to it to not use grid power, use its battery power for periods when the grid is under stress. So we've added a few things that really help to provide additional energy efficiencies. And one area is in the conversion between DC and AC power. I won't go into detail now, but we think some of those things are really important. And the real key is it's meant to be on a smaller scale. It's meant to be people who maybe live in apartments or housing who don't have an opportunity to put rooftop solar or a bunch of batteries in the garage, and they can take it with them when they move. Now, we've approached a number of folks, but we really need to get feedback from different customers in its delivery. And we think it's something that can really help communities of customers who are underserved or haven't had the opportunity to take advantage of some of these technologies. And it's something, like we say in those communities, where if they move from one location to or another, or within the same complex, they can just pick the unit up, take it with them, plug it into the new location. Now, I've been asked, how far along are you? What have you doing with this technology? So we've built a number of prototypes, and we've explored those prototypes with a limited number of customers. All of the customers are very enthusiastic about the concept. They like what they see, but we need to really prove out a lot of the benefits and values that we have in there. We're in that stage, that value test stage, going from prototypes into production in that delivery. We've shared this with quite a number of residents who live in areas that are prone to public safety power shutdowns. And they would buy every one that I make. They often want to buy the prototype that I'm demonstrating to them. But we have to make sure that the design and the functions that we have in it work the way it does, and we need a way to document those benefits whenever you're providing a commercial product into the marketplace. So from our perspective, it would be great if we could arrange a small pilot of different customers, different scenarios, to get feedback and really validate and stress our product to see how it works. And then from there, we could take that before we go out and try to raise additional capital to build larger scale manufacturing capabilities. I'm often asked, well, how much money does it save me, or how long does it take to pay it off? Well, we've done a number of cases on what the payoff period is, and it's in some cases between 5 to 6 years. Everybody's a little different, and that's why having these different scenarios will help us test which scenario has what payoff period and which scenario has what kind of savings it can provide to individual customers. I think the most important thing is it starts really. I liked Paul's comment earlier.
1 minute left.
If we're going to get to 100%, we need to engage all the community, and 45% of Californians rent, and so they don't have the opportunities as other folks within California are for these larger, more expensive, longer 20-year systems provided there. So we look forward. I'm very appreciative to be on the panel. I love everything I'm hearing from the other panelists and the presenters. So let's go Sacramento.
Well, that's great, Bob. One thing that I really like about the approach you've taken is you don't need an electrician. You don't need to get a permit for this from the city. It's plug and play and very simple. I can see people going to Best Buy and picking up your product and taking it home. And they can do more than one, right? I mean, there's depending on the appliance or equipment.
Yeah, one of the things, as Gary mentioned, I try to not monopolize time. But if you notice this octagon, it's made in a sense that we use a lot of common components within the unit. And by raising the height of the octagon, we can increase the type of batteries. And we're in prototypes, we use a number of lithium ion. We're now moving to lithium iron phosphate batteries, gives us 3,000 to 5,000 life cycles. And so you could buy a unit that is for your entertainment center, a unit that's a little bit slightly taller than the one I presented here, that will run your refrigerator for 12 to 24 hours, depending on what kind of refrigerator you have. You can put it on your desktop. So you can place a number of these around your home. Maybe you want to assist your HVAC system so that you can get into the 5, 6, 7, 8 kilowatt hours, which is for many people, it's about half to 3/4 of their daily kilowatt hour usage. And so you can place them around where they use and support the devices that are connected to it. And that's kind of our, kind of a la mode. You get the best price point for how you want to use it, and the customer gets to make that decision before they go all in with a $20,000 or $30,000 investment.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a very unique approach, and one which should have a lot of.
I mentioned one thing. Its ability to communicate with the grid. Its ability to communicate with you through not only its mobile app but its internet. It's a very intelligent device. And that when the power goes out, it can notify you through text or email or voice if you're in your home that the power's out. Give you an estimate about how long. You can integrate it with your smart home systems and your smart thermostats and things. So we've really designed it to kind of move into this whole era of full engagement by the end consumer with their electronic devices.
You have time?
That's fantastic. We're going to move on, but Bob, in the chat, notice that there's somebody from Grid Alternatives who works with low income and disadvantaged communities, and they immediately want to talk to you.
Great.
But now let's go to another type of technology, which could be very important for people in situations where they can't spend a whole lot of money, but do want to improve their energy performance and reduce their energy bills. Danny Eastman is the CEO and founder of Thermoshade, which is another way to reduce energy losses in buildings. So Diana, tell us what Thermoshade can do for people.
Well, good morning, Gary, and thank you to Clean Start and Mr. Lau. That was very energizing about his potential for using multiple technologies. And luckily, we already have had some sort of relationship, which I'll speak about later. So, to start with, so this is going to be a bit of calisthenics because our material is so visual that I'm going to try and run through what the material is, what it does, and then have a couple seconds left for actual viewing of the product itself, since I have it set up. So the Thermoshade material improves the efficiency of window glass by minimizing the transfer of heat. Most of the applications are interior roller shades, but we can also be used in screens for reducing heat gain from, say, skylights, which can be effective. So reducing the solar heat gain in homes and offices is key to reducing HVAC runtimes and creating personal comfort, which is what all the architects and everyone in energy efficiency talks about. So this is where the innovative technology comes in with a little assist from NASA. So traditional shades block visible light. And so you have a little very dark weave, you roll them down, it's dark in your house. So our product blocks another spectrum of heat producing energy called near infrared. So the result is a shade that cuts glare and is highly transparent. Because it's so transparent, it could be left down all the time. And since it's effective, positioning this is key, because if it's down all the time, it's always functioning. So people barely notice that it's in the window. So how do we know it works? Luckily, the Department of Energy, as Mr. Lau was talking about, has taken an interest in calculating potential energy savings for window shades. Lucky for us. So each shade material can now be tested and placed in a database. So engineers, architects can access these values, usually running through Energy Pro, and to calculate their efficiency. So if you're doing a retrofit or a new project, you can build this right into the model. So we're happy to announce that Thermoshade outperformed all the shades when it comes to the amount of visible light and heat gain in this database. So Lawrence Berkeley Lab Optics showed that 53% of the solar heat gain is rejected when the shade is placed over a base window. And of course, they measure it at 90 degrees. So as the sun goes up, it's actually more efficient. So 53% is actually a minimal number. So back to SMUD, a small field assessment was done by SMUD showing that the material saved 0.9 kilowatt hours of cooling energy per square foot during the Sacramento summer months. So of course, the more you use, the more efficient it's going to be. And the shades would be a good candidate technology for use in building energy retrofits in areas with high cooling loads. So the possible integration of window shades into energy incentive programs would be one of the most cost-effective ways to improve window performance and comfort across any income strata.
1 minute left.
So the material is ready to commercialize with all supply chains secured. Because it's so visual, I'm gonna, what I have is a couple windows set up. So I'm gonna rush through this. I'm gonna turn off the my video for a second and reposition the camera and then let you see what it looks like. So bear with me. So this particular window is a large sliding glass panels. And traditionally the veins, the plastic veins would be blocking the light. But now what you can see is that you can see well through it. See if I can do this. So it is reducing the glare. So you got those little coverings. And then it might be an opportunity to just show you how thin this material is. So this is 0.09 inches thick. So about the width of a couple of pieces of paper. So a lot of material can be placed on a roll. Is that time? So let me, okay. Well, so I guess I got one window. Do you want me to do another?
Just continue, Diane.
Okay. I'm rushing. So I'm going to stop the video right now and share another window with you for the grand finale here. And also one thing, drum roll. So another thing that we haven't discussed is the thermal protection during the winter. So during the winter, the material also reflects thermal energy, your gas and other appliances to keep the house insulated. So here is a window, a larger window with the screen down. And you can see that it's clear. And so this is what I mean by it's working all the time. So when you get huge amounts of sun, it's reducing the solar heat gain, but people don't know it's in the window. So it's unique in that way too. So that is the end of the presentation, and I will cede to the other wonderful technologies.
So in terms of payback, in terms of the reductions in heat loss, et cetera, do you have any notions of what the cost benefit is on this?
So cost benefit, again, depends on, so I talked about the savings in kilowatt hours of cooling energy that SMUD calculated. So yes, you could calculate that. And especially if SMUD does another pilot. This was done quite a while ago and it was very small. So this would be a great chance to do that. So if you calculate the kilowatt hours of cooling energy per square foot, yes, you can. So like I said, the more material you put in the windows, and usually if you do a commercial space, which is very effective, the more you put in, the more you can save. So yes, both the energy modeling and the short study that SMUD did can calculate how much you can save physically, because you also save on fan power, lower run times in HVAC systems, improves the longevity of the machines. So there are lots of other costs to calculate as well.
All right. All right. Well, that is fantastic. And again, a very simple addition. When I had to get my home remodeled and meet all the codes, we did put up those very dense gray plastic shade screens, which my family immediately took down and hid from me, and I've not been able to find them since. So we're nowhere near.
So now you have heat issues at the glass, unfortunately.
Absolutely, and then everybody complains about that. So very good. But let's move on to the last member of our panel in the morning here, Jeremy Spillman. He's Chief Revenue Officer and co-founder of Hank. Hank has a company based on the insight, really, that just installing energy management systems in buildings does not necessarily lead to much in the way of energy savings if they don't perform well and if they're not used well. And you've had some great success in really making some dramatic improvements in building energy performance by what you've done. So Jeremy, can you tell us about your product and where you stand with that now? And welcome this morning.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and thank you so much for having me, Gary. So, what our product does is it combines a technology and a service that is very much needed when it comes to the management in commercial real estate. HVAC compromises not only 25% of overall commercial building OpEx when you look at both the energy costs as well as the maintenance, replacement costs, all the money that continuously goes into here. And I think what we found is the way that you can really push this and advance this is not only focusing on what we're doing sustainability wise by reducing the energy consumption, which is really our core goal, but if you can paint this in a way that you can get building ownership groups to actually say, okay, great, this provides not only a sustainability return, but an overall return on my building, it's really kind of shifting it from being an energy only platform to end-to-end commercial management of HVAC. And that's what we're finding here right now is the current solutions that exist in the space now, and this is really what we've kind of broken it out into, is there's too many hands trying to move too many objects. And that's the problem that you see and why there's not really been an advancement in software or winner takes all in this market is simply due to the fact that there's too many people coming to the trough to eat. You have analytics software that are going to tell you how your building is supposed to be improved. Well, that gets handed off to a different person on the building automation side, who is then managed by an HVAC contractor. And then on a day-to-day, the building engineer has to look over that. And overlooking all this is a property manager, which makes it a completely broken supply chain where there's nobody owning the end-to-end management. Because in all reality, the easiest way to run a commercial building when it comes to HVAC is just to have no automation. Run everything at max heating and cooling at the same time, and you're never going to get any tenant complaints because the VAVs or the actual vents themselves in the zones will open up enough and close down enough to provide that. And that is such a massive energy waste. 40% of carbon emissions come from the built environment. And that is so tied into the fact that not only is the software and technology behind in commercial HVAC management, but there's no end-to-end solution. Everything is fragmented in this area right now. And that's where we developed Hank, right? You have these old, I think that everybody would be as surprised as I was when you walk into these, even the beautiful buildings that we have, Capitol Mall in Sacramento, right? These massive, great looking, shining buildings is being run off of a computer that's Windows XP software. Pre-iPhone 1 technology is running the most expensive energy consumer in these billion-dollar assets is being run off of this type of software, which I think should just tell everybody everything that they need to know right there. There has not been any marketed improvements in software management and software tools in this industry because, as we talk about it, the OEMs are focused on selling hardware, selling new, more efficient equipment. But if you run that efficient equipment the same way that you were running the old inefficient equipment, you're not going to see the improvements that are expected. So people aren't putting the time. Nobody's focused on software because you don't see the same margins when it comes from the OEMs and the Siemens and Johnson Controls. All of those ones are focused on hardware where we could come in and change the software component of it. Well, you take that a little bit further and you go, okay, great. The AI, the software is doing all of these great things. But then you have the virtual building engineering, this bureau that we're building now, based out here in the Sacramento area, that is not only supporting the software platform in itself, but supporting these buildings. So an engineer in a building doesn't just say, hey, you know what, I got a tenant complaint. I'm going to go and completely throw out all of the efficient operations that have been put in this site because I don't understand it. They now have a resource that they can come to and say, hey, I got a complaint today, or the comfort seems a little bit off. The building's a little warm, the building's a little cold. And we can come up with a solution together that doesn't throw away that optimization, that helps them manage the day-to-day performance of that building without the concern of, I'm going to get in trouble because I got too many complaints, or I'm going to get this. Because at the end of the day, the building engineer and the building management people, their goal is not to save energy. Their goal is not to reduce carbon emissions. Their goal is to maintain and operate the building, which everybody in it is happy and comfortable. And there's a big time crossover that's now happening at these big investment levels that are saying, we now have to meet, ESG goals. How do we do that? And that's, hey, putting a virtual engineer in every building where we integrate with 95% of the building management systems on site. We're software only. There's no hardware. There's no capital costs. There's nothing like that. We're able to go in and utilizing our AI control, reduce HVAC energy costs by up to 50% without having to install one new piece of equipment. And then utilizing our on-site service in the virtual building engineering, we're now taking off 80% of HVAC service calls that are now running through the virtual engineering team. So you're not spending additional dollars and having more and more people come into your building, change the operations of it. So this provides not only a massive, KWH, KW demand reduction, all these great things on the energy side, but it gives the overall building a very healthy increase to net operating income.
Gary, you're muted.
When people start, I'm on mute again. There was a time, Jeremy, when we tried to incentivize energy efficiency through performance incentives. And that became very difficult for people to verify because there are variations in weather and all that, comparing one time to another. So it all kind of came back to incentives for putting equipment on, because that was verifiable and you had some notion of what that equipment would do. Your insight is, though, that even if you put the equipment on, you're not necessarily achieving the savings. So does your software help us get back to paying people for performance, and we should organize incentives around that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that, again, you look at the challenges in the industry, right? Is great. I just bought a very efficient new chiller system for, $300,000. Okay, great. I get incentivized for that. But in 2 years, if the operations of that efficient chiller have changed or have not been upkept, or somebody has gone in and say, hey, we're just going to run it at max because, you know what, summertime in California gets pretty hot, you're really losing. The utility themselves are, the estimated energy savings that they had, right? You can try to baseline it on a hardware side, and you might be able to get some of that. But what if they just run the chiller now, even though it's more efficient, 5 more hours? You're not seeing any KWH reduction. You're not seeing really any value in that. You're just saying you bought a more efficient piece of equipment, and people forget about the operations of what actually happens on site. And that again goes back to, I think, the challenge in the industry where our goal is not necessarily to sell a software service, right? Our goal is virtual building engineering, because somebody has to be responsible for the day-to-day operations of the HVAC equipment. And right now we're seeing a massive, kind of decrease in the not only the talent level, but just people that are going into the building engineering field, right? We're seeing, it's blue collar is a very different, trade than it was 20, 30 years ago. So with less people going into this field, the talent pool tends to dry up, and the people that are coming into this aren't the engineering type, right? Don't have the background to understand the mechanics of what needs to happen on the buildings. So as more and more engineers retire out, there's less and less coming in. So that leaves an even larger gap of saying who can really understand what needs to happen in the operations of the building. Whereas great as the AI is, I always say what keeps us around is we get into the building with great energy savings up front, but what keeps us with our clients and why we have such a low churn rate is the virtual building engineering aspect of it, because we become imperative to how that building is running to maintain the efficiencies and maintain all the things that are happening on a day-to-day basis in a commercial office building.
Yeah, and that's really important. I mean, basically, your AI, the guy that you've named Hank, is now the virtual assistant, and you don't need so much expertise from the building manager to understand how to operate the system. So, I mean, penetration wise, how are you doing? I know you were acquired by Jones Lang LaSalle out of Chicago, huge building owner. But what do you see in Sacramento? Is this a hotbed of activity here? Or is there a lot of potential left for your company to apply this technique?
Oh yeah, I mean every building over 50,000 square feet with a centralized system is an opportunity for Hank to go in and put this in there. We grew in Sacramento. We've got some great customers out here. We've worked with SMUD in some places, as well to incentivize our customers for installing Hank, just due to the fact that we can drive massive energy reduction. I think that focusing on like the ownerships, the leaders in Sacramento who own these buildings, who have not only a fiscal responsibility, but overall, an ESG, a sustainability responsibility is really key for us to continue to grow in the area. I think the more that we can work with companies, utilities, specifically, obviously, SMUD in the Sacramento area, to provide additional incentives, to make it so financially, to almost make it a bad move not to do financially, right, is really key for us. And we'll continue to grow that relationship with SMUD and continue to grow here. But again, Sacramento has, what was it? It was 91 degrees last week and 38 degrees this morning. And a lot of times, this is where you see the lack of expertise and experience to handle those comforts, those temperature swings, so that you're not seeing the proper automation, the proper running of the building, because the comfort can be too complex to really deliver on that. So I think that Sacramento is a great region for it. And I do think that we will continue to see growth here. We're seeing great growth in the Bay Area. As energy rates get higher, as summer comes up and we start getting into peak demand and super peak demand, now is the time where we can provide really the highest level of cost savings to our clients as well.
So what were you saying about the average energy reduction from installing Hank? Are we talking 20, 30% in building energy use, or?
Yeah, I think that we typically average around 20% of total building energy, right? Not just specific to HVAC. So on-bill energy reduction is typically around 20%. There's been buildings where we've gone in that were really challenged and we've gotten up to like the 25, 30%. There's been buildings we've gone in that are just, more efficient in nature. As I mentioned, we work with, on the East Coast, a lot of like chill beam, slab cooling, slab heating. So it's just a hydronic system. So it's more efficient in nature. But even being able to capture additional energy savings and LEED platinum buildings, energy scores that are 95 to 98 and still driving those considerable energy savings, I think really shows that we're not going in and saying that your building is being run poorly. We've come up with a new way to have software run your building that's just not available in current systems.
All right. Thank you very much, Jeremy.
You're welcome.
Very interesting. That's really fascinating. So let's open up to a short discussion here. And I want to turn back to Rick, because Rick, I'm watching you and I'm seeing the gears grinding in your head as you're hearing about some of these building innovations, lighting and Thermoshade and Hank and the storage systems. Do you see opportunity here in terms of application of these additional technologies? And I'm particularly interested in the envelope part of it, because windows have always been an issue. The performance is not all that great. We have been looking with companies that provide vacuum insulated glass potentially to improve that. But Diana's product in particular has been fascinating just because it's simple, but yet apparently very effective. Just wanted to get your thoughts on what you've heard on the panel this morning.
Oh, thank you. Very, very fascinating. And absolutely, I really interested. We work with our builders to develop the technologies that make their homes compliant, energy efficient. And window shades that are see-through are great. So that's a great tool. Obviously, LED lighting, efficient lighting is a huge part of the solution. So we've worked a little bit with Hank, and that's very fascinating about how you can operate the system better. So, and of course, the point of use USP or backup power that Bob is sharing is very fascinating. So really cool things for application to existing homes is what I'm seeing and hearing.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot out there, you know, whether it's existing or new build, but, you know, a lot of opportunity. So in terms of rolling out your technologies and what's been your experience with SMUD, is there anything that SMUD could do to help move the technologies that you've already got in the pipeline forward faster?
Well, COVID has been a challenge. It's been really tough to get SMUD personnel out in the workplace. I think that's over now. We just recently had some SMUD folks out looking at our Aquatherm Air, and we weren't able to get the battery addressed yet. But we're really excited to see SMUD personnel back in into the public world, and we're in fact just submitted a proposal for SMUD on the battery deployment that we'll see how that works out. And we've been talking to SMUD people about how the heat pump system can be a solution for project districts that the transmission lines will not support electrification of current technologies, and our unit doesn't require electric resistance heating. So we can use the existing electric panels in most applications and still provide electric space heat and electric water heating at high efficiency heat pumps. So we're right at that stage of beginning to engage aggressively with partners like SMUD.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I guess you've had success too with PG&E outside the SMUD territory and getting them involved with some of the solutions you're offering.
Yeah, we've had a long-term partnership with UC Davis, the Western Cooling Efficiency Center, and one of their professors is the home installation site, and their connections with Frontier Energy and PGE made that a real natural place to get the first on the ground real world data on the performance of the system. So that'll be a benefit to everybody else, SMUD as well.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you. Sergey, if you could design the perfect program with SMUD to demonstrate your product, what would that look like for you? Just take a building and give it a try, or do you have something more specific in mind?
Yeah, I think it would be great to spend some time on like specifying the system, maybe even trying to fit it to the specific kind of lighting fixtures that are installed or are desired to be installed, maybe working with the architect or engineer, but it's like in the ideal case. But in the simplest case, maybe just trying to select a space with just conventional trophers, which are, represent the lion's share of the lighting fixtures in California in particular, like this 2x4 fluorescent trophers, and maybe just trying to design the system that would fit exactly in those spaces, so that they could be just used as a drop-in replacement, and maybe setting up like two identical, let's say, spaces where the first one would have the original fluorescent luminaires, fluorescent fixtures, and the other one will have our lighting sheets, LED lighting sheets installed, and maybe run that space for a certain period of time and have certain sensors installed and just compare the performance of those spaces.
Yeah, that'd be a fantastic test, and love to see that actually with all the technologies we talked about this morning. We're going to wrap up the panel here. Thank you all for participating. It's been a fantastic discussion. Love to see all the creativity that's going on here in the area, and hopefully there will be some things that we can demonstrate locally. But to everybody that we've talked to, Jeremy, Diana, Sergey, Rick, Bob, many thanks for what you've done for us. This has been a focus on in meeting the zero carbon goal. If we could reduce the amount of energy that's required, then that gets us a long way towards meeting that goal as well. So now we're going to move to the second panel, which really talks about adding to the supply base, the storage, and in particular, we're going to be talking about, in a couple of ways, the vehicle to grid opportunity that we have in the mobility sector. So we've got 5 more panelists coming up here in terms of talking about what the opportunities are in this other area. So let's first introduce Kevin Wolfe, who's the president and CEO of Wind Harvest International. Kevin, you've got a very unique wind technology, not one that in the broadest sense hasn't been seen before, but you seem to be getting it to work a lot better than anybody has in the past. Can you open our discussion here as to the opportunity for adding renewable power from wind through the technology that you're developing?
Sure. So, these the traditional turbines, horizontal axis turbines, they have a single blade and it has a single point here, and that blade will shake if it's in turbulence. So they have to be spread far apart in wind farms, and they have to be raised up out of the turbulent zone of wind near the ground. So that leaves this resource, this kind of what we call the mid-level resource of somewhere between 15 and 100 feet above the ground with no technology to harvest it. Now, this is not in every place in the country, but in SMUD's wind farms and the wind farms in California, there is an excellent mid-level resource that's underneath the blades of their turbines. The problem is solved with a vertical axis wind turbine, and we have our turbine here. Can I share my screen here with you?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Let me do that and share the screen and, oh shoot. Okay, dang it. I thought I had this set up for sharing. Uh-oh. Sorry, hang on. Share a screen and dang it. Hang on. Okay, I'm just 1 second. You can't see it. So anyways, I'm just going to go through it and tell you as I can't get the screen to share. So the tall turbines shake as they move in through the near ground wind resource. And our turbines have 2 points connected at 2 points to each blade to a center shaft, and they're doing a vertical action. And they have a natural stall, and they are able to handle the complexities of chaotic near ground wind much more naturally than a horizontal axis turbine. The difficulty in these turbines development is there's been no aeroelastic model. Well, we finally have the first aeroelastic model that allows us to properly predict frequency response and power performance and loads. And without that, all the past vertical axis turbines have failed. So now we have our turbine in Texas at the near ground at the UL's Advanced Wind Turbine Testing Facility. It is going through technology readiness level 7, the pilot project phase of testing. And it is scheduled coming through commercialization in 2023. We'll be installing, we're ordering them now for the next version of the turbine, and we will be showing, we expect to be doing projects in 2023. The key in this market, our key market is the largest market is the understory of wind farms. And every wind farm in California has an excellent near ground wind resource, or a good to excellent. In the Solana resource area, there's probably almost 5,000 megawatts that can be installed. On the Montezuma Hills in the SMUDS project, because of the erosion issues, probably only 50 megawatts can be installed in the understory of the horizontals. So what we have is this enormous opportunity to add a lot of electricity that is generated all day long in the summer, and at night all summer long as the winds, the delta breezes come through that area. So it's a natural asset for all of Northern California, especially in the summer. The process of getting that is to develop pilot projects, because if you're going to go into the solar and wind farms, you better prove that you're not going to hurt the horizontal axis turbines. So we're bringing in a Doppler LiDAR to measure downwind wakes. The resource says that these shed vortices downwind dissipate after about 70 meters, and they bring the faster moving wind from up above down to the ground. That means that you can, according to studies out of Caltech and Stanford, existing horizontal axis turbines should receive about a 10% increase in energy output with rows of vertical axis turbines in front of them. So it's an enormous opportunity to not only make use of excellent wind resource land that cannot presently be used, but to increase the output of the existing stock of turbines. To get into that resource, you got to do, besides the LiDAR studies, you also got to prove you're not killing birds. So north of Highway 12, about a mile or so away from the wind resource area, we have a project on a ranch there that we are pursuing a permit for a 5 to 7 for 1 minute.
Yep.
A 5 to 7 megawatt solar wind hybrid project, and that we'll do bird studies on. What we'd like to have from SMUD is, one, evaluate your mid-level wind resource. Your 2005 study shows it as a negative wind shear in these areas in the afternoons. It shows just an excellent mid-level resource, and SMUD should evaluate that, fully evaluate their resource. We'd also like to have a person on our bird study team advisory board to help us think through all the bird study issues that would allow us to enter the SMUD resource area, and ideally eventually have a pilot project that feeds into the Rio Vista grid. So not into the main grid, but feeds right into the Rio Vista grid and provides us an opportunity to prove how well our turbines operate with the horizontal axis turbines. Lastly, we got out of the valley of death through using a crowdfunding campaign. We raised $1.5 million roughly last year from it, and we're about to launch another $2.5 million raise. And this raises the capital that we need to get out of technology readiness level 9, which says you got to have turbines operating for a couple years before banks will finance large projects.
Time.
I'll stop there.
Great. Well, it's very interesting. This technology has developed a lot over the last 30 years. We do have a question. What's the maximum power output of your horizontal axis turbine? I know they come in different sizes, but
yeah, so they come in pairs, always in pairs, a meter apart, because when they're a meter apart, Bernoulli's continuity principle speeds up that wind through the gap and increases the energy output of the pair. So pairs come in 140 kilowatts in a resource area like Solano. Down in Barbados, where it's trade winds, there'll be 100 kilowatt units.
And in terms of, roughly looking at the SMUD Solano wind farm, I mean, Paul this morning said that they're looking for 3,000 megawatts in the plan from renewables and storage. What do you think you might be able to do just in the Solano wind farm itself, going with the mid-level resource?
Well, in the SMUD's wind resources, we calculated about 50 megawatts. But in the whole region, and that's about a 6.7 meter per second site at our hub height, which is about 15 to 20 meters above the ground. But in that whole region, including north of Highway 12, where Traffic Air Force Base does not allow tall turbines, but they will allow our turbines, you can put in about 5,000 megawatts. So it's an enormous resource, but you can't add any more tall turbines to the resource.
Right. So something that's much more compatible with the resource that's left. Well, that really.
That's our test turbines down in Palm Springs, an earlier version.
Right. So the ones that I remember you're working on now, they're actually lighter weight than what's shown in the picture.
Oh, yeah, they're much larger, and they have only 3 blades, and they have only 6 arms, and they're much more efficient, and they are They're just amazingly tough machines. They'll last for 40 plus years. They use ferrite permanent magnet generators, not rare earth magnet generators. They use inversion power converters that connect into 1741 grid connection standards. They're made so most of the product is made in the United States. There's a place in West Sacramento, American Metals, that can make most of our turbines. So we're looking at making them locally, assembling them in Dixon and shipping them down to Solano and a short distance away.
Oh, that's fantastic. So what happens in high winds? You often have to feather the props on the big horizontal axis.
Yeah, so the benefit in a combined cycle is the tall turbines need to feather their blades as winds get to rated power, or they start to have problems because gusts come through. So what you do is you set those turbines to start reducing their efficiency before rated power and keep our turbines running. And therefore you keep the lower the wear and tear on the tall turbines, and you have our turbines pick up the slack because we don't have a problem with turbulence, gusts, and high wind problems.
Well, very interesting. Well, quite an innovation. Oh, there's another picture that's come up of what a system could look like.
Yeah, that's a wind farm up in Simpson Ridge. That ridge line up there has an 8.4 meters per second wind resource at 15 meters above the ground. So these wind places like in Wyoming, where they don't want more damage to their view sheds. Well, they got the 12 turbines in the view shed, add another layer, you can hardly see them.
Right. Well, that's fantastic. Well, let's move on to the other side of the equation for those 3,000 megawatts storage, and call on Ezra Beeman, who's the founder and managing director of let's see now, Energea. I never know how to pronounce that, Ezra. But at any rate, you've made quite a bit of progress in your home energy system, and really one that you've designed from the beginning as being grid interactive and providing a lot of other benefits than just kilowatt hours of storage for the homeowner. And you're about to do a big deployment. So tell us what problem you're trying to solve and how you're going about it.
Great. So first of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I think we are maybe not the longest suffering, but we've been here a while. So the problem we're trying to solve is focused on decentralized energy. Right now, the cheapest kilowatt hour, probably maybe even cheaper than energy efficiency at this stage, is the kilowatt hour you produce on your roof and you use that doesn't go outside of your house. And that's one of the key powers of decentralized energy. You don't need all the rest of the infrastructure. Although the industry insiders would say, well, but what about the time the sun's not shining? And that's fair enough. What we are seeing in advanced economies like Germany, like Australia, and soon to be California, is you can get too much of a good thing. Here we have some of the key challenges of, as you have higher levels of decentralization, you can see Australia there is forecast to be up to 50% by 2040. The United States is much lower than that, but California is on a trajectory that's going to be closer to Australia, just because of the quality of the solar resource. The grid reaches its limits, and I'm not talking, it's reaching its limits in a couple of ways. One, you get to 0 times of zero load on the system, which has got all kinds of issues for stability, frequency control, voltage, and you also experience it in the distribution networks as well. And in certain markets, Germany and Australia are leading in that area. You actually cannot install rooftop in some states without the ability to curtail it. They're also radically overhauling the feed-in tariffs. I mean, in California, we already have radical overhaul of the feed-in tariffs under the latest proposals. And so there's a whole bunch of forces that are pushing back on solar on its own. Now, battery is a natural solution, but battery storage is complex and it's costly. And here we have, I think, what would be considered a not uncommon installation here, where you've got one particular battery installed, you've got additional equipment for the interconnection, for the whole of house backup. You've got the inverter for the solar array. You've got some various other boxes. I'm not sure what they do, but this is not uncommon. So what we have done is develop a solar storage solution that addresses some of the key challenges that we're facing. One is it removes the complexity through an all-in-one hybrid hybrid inverter, which has the solar inverter and the battery inverter and the batteries all in the one box. It reduces costs associated with installation. It looks better and it operates better because it's integrated. The other thing that we're doing is addressing some of the shortfalls of the current approach, which are things like derating. A lot of these batteries, it doesn't take much before they have to derate because of heat. And also the availability. A lot of them rely on internet connections, and those aren't always available. So if you want to use these batteries for the good of the grid, whether it's by providing services to the distribution networks or providing services to the market, it's really important that these resources are available, that they're high quality. And so that's really what led us to developing a platform. And that platform is comprised of the box. The box has got our own battery management system, our own inverter, hybrid inverter. It doesn't have our own cells. We use CATL, the #1 manufacturer of lithium iron phosphate cells in the world. They sell to BMW, they sell to Tesla. We also have developed our own patented artificial intelligence-driven optimization software. So this anticipates what load at the customer premise is going to be, and we're building the capability.
Anyway, he gave a good presentation still. I think he still did a good job explaining. And then
Whoops.
Thanks.
Somebody.
That was a glitch. Sorry, keep going.
And the third thing is the fleet management. So together, this provides a platform that we see one that can be built on for providing all the value stacks that are addressable by storage. In terms of the actual business itself, we think our key advantages are threefold. One, simplicity. As I said, streamlined installation, certainty of compatibility of the integration of components, single point of hardware and maintenance. And for those aggregators that are emerging, this is all really important. It's also really important for the homeowner when it comes to the installation and the user experience. Flexibility. We have the whole IP stack, and that sets us apart. Most folks have either built some software, or they've built some hardware. They don't have the full stack. That means we can upgrade the whole thing remotely. And in future, we intend to integrate it with other people's technology at each one of the stack components. And then finally, speed of response. So because we have our own engineering core, which is currently in Australia, but we're in the process of our market entry, we're targeting Hawaii, California, and New York for our solution. That it's really important as things are changing all the time. We've got changes to interconnection standards. We've got changes to market arrangements. And this is because of things like managing frequency control. So being able to respond quickly, we're on our 3rd generation. It's going to be really important. Just in terms of the AI, this is done, I guess this is maybe not surprising. We're using weather, we're using historic usage patterns, we're using whether or not people are in their homes, what the state of the battery is to drive that optimization. And that's how you unlock significantly more benefits from these batteries. In terms of what it looks like and when it's installed, I'll go back to here to remind you what a typical install currently looks like. Are we at time?
One minute.
This is what we actually achieve. I mean, this is on a real wall in a real garage. This one, they actually have the lines going up. This one is actually an invisible installation. So we think it looks good too. Thank you.
Very good, Ezra. So what's your typical system cost?
We are aiming for about a $7,500 in US dollar installation, sorry, the cost for the unit, and that includes all the hardware, and this has got a 14 kilowatt hour, 5 kilowatt configuration. So it's very comparable to the Powerwall, except we have our own solar inverter, so you're saving money there off the bat.
All right, very good. Well, that's a different approach. You're based in Davis right now, so definitely a local company. You're looking for demos in California, more worldwide. What could SMUD do for you in terms of setting up a demo?
In terms of what they could do for us, so we've built this from the ground up to be grid integrated. So I'm sure I know they've got virtual power plant demonstrations already up. Just being able to demonstrate that we're in that space and that we've got a lower price point, higher performance level which we think are going to radically improve on the cost effectiveness of using this across the distribution network.
All right, very good. Thank you. Well, talking about virtual power plants, let's turn to Drew Smith. He's with Smarter Grid Solutions, and Smarter Grid Solutions has been very active in developing microgrids, virtual power plants across the country, active in California. Drew's the sales leader for North American utility distributed energy resource management systems. So you've had experience with installing these systems. So tell us about what they're like, what gains they provide, and what opportunities there might be here for SMUD. Drew?
Yeah, thanks so much, Gary, for having me. I wish we could all be together in person, particularly since it was 39 degrees and raining here in Seattle this morning.
Geez.
Yeah, I was walking my daughter to school, and that was unpleasant. But just to dive in here, so as we add more renewables to the grid, we need to continue to ask ourselves, how can we optimize these assets? And one way to optimize renewables and storage is through the use of microgrids. In California, Sacramento, and really many places across the country, resiliency issues are becoming more and more common. These are having extreme major impacts on communities and businesses. I am a native New Orleanian, so I know last summer with the hurricanes, as all 6 transmission lines into the city were wiped out and people were without power for multiple weeks, it doesn't just harm the businesses or the communities, but also really impacts the individuals. And so having solutions out there that can really deliver resiliency in these times of need are extremely important. But in a lot of places right now, utilities, businesses will throw in a diesel generator as a backup for a microgrid, flip that area into an island and call it a day. But in my opinion, I don't really think that's solving the grander issue of what is driving the need for these microgrids. Energy storage and SGS's Strata Resilient software allows utilities, communities, and businesses to take their microgrids to the next level. Strata Resilience is a microgrid manager that doesn't just send the battery into islanding mode. It optimizes both DER assets for supply and manages flexible load. Looking at this from the angle of how can we reduce greenhouse gas emissions, the microgrid's objective function can be to prioritize renewable energy and use it use a backup generator as little as possible. And even if the microgrid is designed well to really take advantage of renewable energy, then there are a lot of cases where a backup generator won't even be necessary. And SGS has been working with a utility in North America that had a devastating accident and wanted to rebuild a smart city. And so we're acting as the microgrid coordinator across that entire town, working with building management systems, rooftop solar, energy storage, and the main goal of this entire microgrid project is to maximize the use of greenhouse gases and not rely on this backup generator. So new energy storage assets, especially when paired with renewables, allow for a crucial balance to be struck between grid services and renewable energy targets aimed at reducing carbon emissions. Our software allows for a balancing act to occur and can be monitored 24/7 by the host utility using any existing SCADA or ADMS system portal. We work closely with our customers to understand their unique needs and provide an operating scheme that fits. This is typically a dynamic process that is revisited on an annual or semi-annual basis to fine-tune the scheme so that it continues to serve the needs in years to come. New energy programs, new resiliency needs, new grid service requirements, new carbon goals. We understand that these are ever-evolving priorities, and as the Strata name would imply, we layer these priorities in a way that benefits our customers and their communities at large. As our customer needs change, Strata Resilience is the tool that allows them to adapt and maintain safety and reliability in an increasingly decentralized grid. But now there's this question of, we have all these DER assets on our grid, we don't really need to be in a microgrid mode, so what are they doing right now? Well, recently our parent company, Mitsubishi Electric Power Products Inc., or MEPI, commissioned a 4 megawatt battery for SMUD. There's so much potential for these assets to help with renewable growth. For example, in New York, SGS's other software, Cirrus Flex, is managing a fleet of batteries for Endurant Energy and Consolidated Edison. The battery provides load relief during peak summer months, but for the rest of the year, Endurant can use the batteries to participate in the New York ISO market. This opens up a lot of opportunity to expand renewables by allowing Endura to take advantage of multiple revenue streams. Developers are going to want to partner with utilities to add batteries to the grid because there is a lot of profitability out there. And a utility like SMUD can benefit from an arrangement like this because they're able to utilize the batteries to provide load relief without having to pay for the batteries themselves. And on top of that, they can continue to add renewable energy to the grid, knowing that the battery is managing these constraints, and they won't have to upgrade the correct grid infrastructure. So Smarter Grid Solutions got its start helping utilities manage growing renewable penetration. So whether this is through optimizing renewable energy assets to provide resiliency in the form of a microgrid, or controlling storage and other DERs to provide reliability, we want to help utilities smooth out their renewable transition. And we're happy to do that with not just utilities, but developers and other partners, businesses who want microgrids, et cetera. So we're out there to help really push forward the DER transition.
That's time.
All right, thank you very much, Drew. Now, you mentioned that you were involved with a city that had a disaster and you're rebuilding the system there. Can you tell us what city you're dealing with?
Yes, so it's Lac-Mégantic up in Quebec in Canada. So there's a major train disaster there back in 2013, and now we are working with them on that microgrid up there. And for those of you who will be at DistribuTech later in May, our director of products will be doing a case study on that at DistribuTech. So please come and stop by if you're there.
Yeah, potentially good example of what can be done. I'm also fascinated by your thoughts on building, DERMS, VPP, microgrid, whatever, around the MESA, the Mitsubishi Energy Storage project that you have here in Sacramento. So have you been exploring these ideas with SMUD in terms of what more could be done using that?
I do for 11. I knew this was going to go to, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly something we want to explore with SMUD is now that the battery's in there and our partnership with Mitsubishi as our parent organization is that battery can become the grid forming battery necessary to take that area into a microgrid and continue to expand. And one area we like to look at, especially when putting our technology out there, is to take this path of least resistance. So you'll be in safe hands with Mitsubishi Electric as our parent company. We can take it from a small step to see that it works for SMUD and then continue to expand on that microgrid from there.
So, I mean, when you put the control and communication systems in, it's not inexpensive. In terms of number of customers or any other metric, megawatts controlled, what kind of size is sort of the sweet spot for doing something with a microgrid and the management systems that you're involved with?
It varies. It just all depends on really what you want to get out of it. Is this a small community microgrid, which we can be on the smaller side, with a 500 kilowatt battery as the basis for it with some rooftop solar. But then if you're looking, somewhere where on the outskirts of the grid where you're trying to do a fully off-grid microgrid, then it just depends on what the load is, and so it's so dependent on various factors.
Okay, but I mean something even as small as a 500 kW battery installation could be done.
Yeah, absolutely, and it can be done just for a manufacturing park or anything. It just depends on how to do it. It can be very small to extremely large.
So what kind of payback do people typically have when they install one of these systems?
Yeah, it's a less than 10-year payback.
Okay.
And then at the same time is I like to say that's challenging to put a price on resiliency, particularly after talking to my brother who didn't have power for 3 weeks. When I asked him at the time how much he would be willing to pay for energy, then he threw out an enormous number. So we like to do not just the payback, but the service that it provides.
Interesting. Well, that's really matured quite a bit. Obviously, microgrids are a huge topic, VPPs, and Paul Lau has talked about now specifically building out more of them in Sacramento. So good opportunity, and we want to make sure that you stay connected with what's going on here. But let's move to the topic now of tying in the vehicles in the area to be a grid support resource the EVs. And I hadn't heard the number before, but Paul this morning said that their goal is to get 300,000, serve 300,000 EVs in Sacramento region. That would mean that we would have a higher density per person of EVs than any other place in the country that we've been talking to. Huge opportunity then for having the bidirectional charging systems and how they can be used. So let's call on first Doug Alfaro, who's General Manager of North America for Wallbox Chargers. Wallbox has made a good market entry, very advanced product, originated in one of my favorite cities in the world, Barcelona. And we'd like to hear more about what you can do, Doug, with controlling the vehicles charging in the system to support SMUD, both vehicle to home and vehicle to grid. So please tell us about what you have.
Fantastic. All right. Thanks so much, Gary. I'm going to pull up a presentation here. Just a couple of slides. Let's get into presentation mode. Hope you can see that. Again, my name is Douglas Alfaro. I'm the General Manager for Wallbox here in North America. So Wallbox is a manufacturer of intelligent charging and energy management systems. Here in the US, we're actually based in the Bay Area. So we're just a little ways away, but as a global company, we're based in Barcelona, Spain. Today we're here to focus on the bidirectional charging aspect and the different use cases and also value propositions that you might find with the technology. What's key to make the technology work is really the charging hardware. So that's what enables a vehicle to safely and intelligently extract the energy from the car and use it in a home, the building, or even send it back onto the grid. And for this functionality, we've introduced a product called the Quasar 2. That's what you see here in this photo. And that's planned to be released in the US later this year. That's actually been deployed already for the last 2 years throughout Europe in different pilot programs with both automakers and utilities in scaled projects numbering, in the hundreds of chargers deployed in people's residence. So we're looking forward to being able to do that here locally when we launch this product. At the end of this presentation, I'll show you kind of a real world use of this that we actually use at our own headquarters in Barcelona, Spain. And so when we talk about the different value propositions, I want to kind of talk about the use cases. One of them that's most prevalent is known as vehicle to home. This means using or leveraging the vehicle's battery for use within the home, not necessarily sending it back onto the grid. And even with that, you already have some key benefits like reducing power from the grid. For example, in a surge scenario where there might be a heat wave, you can run your air conditioning system from the power of your car. And by doing that, you're actually saving money, optimizing energy consumption, charging when there's low prices at night, and discharging when there might be high pricing, like during time of use peak pricing windows of hours. And then the kind of other benefit that you have, as was mentioned before, is the resiliency aspect. So you have a giant battery sitting in your garage or in your driveway that can help power your home in the case of a grid failure. Kind of all this together also has some return on investment. So a few studies show that you can have anywhere between $300 to $1,000 per year in savings just by using these kinds of strategies. Second kind of use case is vehicle to building. So same way as with home, you're optimizing energy use and generating savings, but actually the highest benefit in this scenario is avoiding what are called peak demand charges. So being able to leverage by the building communicating to the different chargers and vehicles that energy to offset peaks during the most expensive time of power consumption, not just use. You're able to offset either penalties or high charges used in those scenarios, and also leverage renewable energy most efficiently. Let's say you have solar panels that are generating in excess, you can actually store that in the fleet of vehicles when instead of sending it back onto the grid, and actually self-consume that when it's most beneficial to the building. So a couple other use cases there. What gets really interesting is both for vehicle to building and vehicle to home to add vehicle to grid to that use case. So this is a little bit more complex, requires a bit more like an interconnection agreement and also grid disconnect devices to be paired with your charger, but opens fundamentally new kind of use cases where you can send energy back on the grid and support flexibility services for grid stabilization. You can do this very quickly and support frequency response. or just shave your peaks and also integrate renewable energy within kind of building or home use by having an aggregator or a utility send commands to that charger to optimize what's good for the distribution grid. So in closing, I just want to show kind of what that looks like in real life. So this is our building in Barcelona, Spain. It's a snapshot of a common day. What you have from top to bottom is a grid power limit. If you exceed that limit in Barcelona, they cut your power. So you definitely don't want to do that. The green line is the theoretical usage of the building or the demand. So you see it would have exceeded the limit. The blue is what the building actually consumed when it's utilizing quasars to offset the energy. Yellow is actually solar capacity that you can see later in the day helps reduce the building's load. But the real focus is really on the purple line. So you can see between 7 and 10 a.m., the quasars discharged heavily to offset that giant peak that would have sent the energy over the power limit. And then late at night, around midnight to 3, actually started to charge because that's when energy is cheapest and when the building is consuming the least amount. So this kind of shows this in action. You can imagine this on a smaller scale within a home or a larger scale within buildings or even at grid level. And that's the kind of use cases that bidirectional charging can uncover. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Gary, you're muted.
On bidirectional charging, and in some of the bigger use cases like vehicle to grid, you were saying that there's some technology improvement that needs to be done. Where are you on that, and when do you expect to be able to roll out technology that's fully functional for vehicle to grid?
Yeah, so the vehicle to grid technology is here already. So what I was referring to was the additional need of kind of interconnection hardware, as you might see in a solar installation or a storage installation, to be added to kind of the dynamics of the charger. So this is here today. What's kind of being still developed is the communication between the vehicles, the charger, and the grid. So these standards are still in, let's call them draft form. They were available for many years with the CHAdeMO standard. So the Nissan Leaf is a vehicle that's capable of doing this, but only most recently is this being defined now for the new generation of EVs that are coming down to consumers like the Ford F-150 Lightning, the Chevy Silverado, and these others that have communicated that they will be bidirectional capable. So it just requires a bit more integration with the grid. So as a solar and storage system would have interconnection devices and also interconnection agreement. So it's a bit more cost in there for the end user if they actually want to put energy onto the grid as opposed to using it for self-consumption.
So that leads me to think that the opportunity with SMUD, given that they're trying to be very forward-looking, might be to work out some of those grid to vehicle agreements that you need and show that. So we'll have more discussion on that, I'm sure. And do you have many big deployments of wall box chargers in California yet?
Not in California yet. So this has largely been prevalent throughout Europe, mostly in the UK, because there's very easy access to what are called wholesale markets or open markets for energy. And the utility suppliers there are, let's say, designed programmed to be able to incentivize or provide incentives to users, so at the home level or at the building level, to reap some benefits for some of that energy being put back onto the grid. And so as important as clarification around interconnection and facilitating that or supporting those technologies to facilitate putting energy on the grid, the design for programs that can provide benefits to users for putting energy onto the grid are equally important. And that varies a lot by region, by utility, by priorities. So that's another area, I think, of great support to really see this proliferate.
All right, very good. Appreciate that. Let's move on to John Fortune. John is with Swell. He's the Vice President of the Grid Services Market Development. And Swell's taken a somewhat different approach to the question of integrating all these electric vehicles and charging so that they have maximum benefits into the system. So, John, tell us what developments you have in your company and where you're heading.
Sure. Thank you for inviting us to speak today. I think, a lot of folks have already talked about some of the elements that Swell's very involved in. So I'll kind of preface that Swell Energy is a company whose mission is to remove barriers to the mass adoption of clean energy technology, both with homeowners, businesses, in the future, renter markets, multifamily properties. And we do this by bringing, different distributed energy resource technologies together with property owners, industry partners, original equipment manufacturers, and utilities through the deployment and aggregation of these resources to deliver grid services to utilities under what's called a virtual power plant, which has been mentioned several times. And the opportunity here is that people are deploying these systems. We've heard about from EV charger companies. Swell has a recent partnership with an EV charger company, Nuvi. We heard about PV and battery storage for homeowners. We heard about portable energy storage in the prior panel. So there are a ton of different resources that are out there that people are putting into their homes. And the idea for virtual power plants is to leverage all of these various resources by creating a software platform, as well as a sort of a customer engagement strategy for how we access those customers' devices, how we incentivize them to enroll and participate in a virtual power plant, in order to leverage those resources to do things like decarbonize the power generation system, to balance load usage for utilities, to reduce the cost of supplying that power both to homeowners and utilities, and leverage these sort of local resources that are available from folks that are spending this money on their own to deploy these systems. And distributed energy resources, is kind of a catch-all phrase. It could also mean load control devices. Swell as a company has over 100 megawatts of grid services contracts across 6 different utilities in the US, and it's including Hawaii, California, and New York. And expects to have about 300 megawatt hours of energy storage deployed to over 15,000 homes and businesses over the next few years. Some of those virtual power plants are some of the biggest in the country. Our Home Battery Rewards virtual power plant in Hawaii, it straddles Maui, the island of Hawaii, and Oahu, and is actually delivering from behind the meter at residential homes, is delivering not only capacity reduction during the late day peaks, but is being used to build capacity during the middle of the day when solar is generating an excess of grid need, and provide fast frequency response, all from the same device. This is the quintessential example of a stacked benefit scenario, which is really only accessible through these types of virtual power plant utility grid services contracts that Swell has been promoting and developing since as early as 2014.
1 minute.
And the idea, again, for virtual power plants, Swell brings together, we're a technology agnostic company. We bring together kind of 3 fundamental aspects of virtual power plants. We have a development side of the business. We're one of the largest deployment companies for solar and battery storage in California. We partner with other technology providers, load control devices, EV manufacturers, battery storage, to deploy these projects out to customers, to work with customers directly. We have a grid services side of our business, which I lead our market development team, which deals directly with utilities and negotiating contracts, performance-based contracts, and developing these virtual power plant programs, these VPPs in a box. And then we have a third side of our business, which is financing. And having financing there allows us to offer financing solution to customers for all of these kind of products and merge that with the grid services so that really the grid services and revenues that are associated with those programs is used to buy down the cost of these systems for consumers. We can get on the front end of that and provide an additional 10 to 15% of value to homeowners through the revenues that come from utilities to adopt these technologies.
Well, excellent. Now, have you made deployments of your software in California?
We have. We actually have several virtual power plants, both with CCAs, community choice aggregators, and investor-owned utilities that we are, and our software is called the Grid Amp, and it is a DERMS platform that we're using. It has all of the fancy stuff that was described by Andrew and Smart Grid, able to do, algorithmic optimization of these systems, forecasting. And because what's critical for virtual power plants is really balancing both the customer retail use case, which I show here is backup power, solar self-consumption, TOU bill savings, with the utility use case, which is the delivery of these aggregated grid services. And that there is really a balance point there, because sometimes if a utility wants to use a grid resource, it may actually harm the customer's retail case, which makes that more costly for the utility, right? And potentially impactful to the customer's business model, who is fundamentally paying for these systems.
So what would be an ideal opportunity for you to engage with SMUD and contribute to their zero carbon goal? Do you need help identifying a community with its assets that you could put together with your software? Have you already looked at Sacramento? Just trying to get sort of what would be a great next step for you to be engaged in Sacramento.
Well, I think Swell has been very successful. A lot of the virtual power plants that we're under contract to provide with utilities have been won through competitive solicitations for those grid services. And SMUD recently released an RFI for a virtual power plant, energy storage virtual power plant. I think what's important in these structures is that Swell very much so is both an aggregator and a program implementer for these solutions. And there's another path that some utilities are taking where they're looking to directly connect with these devices and control these devices on their own. I think there is at this point in the market an inherent need as an aggregator, because a lot of installers don't necessarily understand the virtual power plant solution, nor is it in their business to worry about managing a virtual power plant or communicating that to customers. And the same thing holds often for utilities, that there are some concerns and risks with controlling a customer's device on their property. There's potential liability risks. There's security needs, and so the language of that connection between utilities and customers and customer devices, I think very squarely should sit with the aggregator model, so that an entity such as Swell can take on both the risk of delivering on a performance contract and a program, but also be able to clearly understand and manage the business of engaging with customers and enrolling them for those virtual power plant programs.
Great. So I don't know what the plans are for SMUD on other RFPs, RFIs, but I'm sure that this is one that they're thinking about, and would encourage you to stay connected in the area and aware of what's going on. We have had a couple questions come into the chat that I'll turn to now. Doug, on the wall box units, the Quasar that you've been talking about, have a question whether it's been certified to UL 1741 SA.
Yes, the plans to certify to UL 1741 SA for our launch later this year. That's right. Yeah, we do want to pursue projects in California, and it's a requirement, so we plan to have that as well.
All right, and then for Ezra, John Barlow had a question of whether your system will integrate with virtually any kind of PV type brand, I guess, in terms of what you looked at compatibility for what's offered here in California. So Ezra, where are you on that?
Yeah, so we are compatible with any PVs. The main limit is the voltage input, and we are working to increase that. So the short answer is yes. The other, I mean, because we run a string system, we'll have to use optimizers in California at least, if not the US. So, and we're working on that.
Okay, very good. So Andrew, maybe I'll put the question to you because you're looking at the integration of a lot of these systems and controlling them. As I'm hearing the discussion this morning, there's wall-mounted storage systems. There's bidirectional charging with the EVs. There's other things that can be done. It just sounds like at some point, somebody's going to get very clever about integrating all of that into one cluster of devices that go in the home, including controlling thermostats, et cetera. Looking into your crystal ball, what are you seeing in terms of where the industry may be heading?
Yeah, so I think the industry is heading to that area where each house is an individual microgrid based on all of this wonderful technology that's coming out, but also each house is its own grid asset. And from where we sit is the ability to communicate to those and help the utility understand, have awareness of what's out there, but then also have the ability to utilize that to really protect their grid, I think is really where this industry is going. And it's something that's certainly exciting from our point of view.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And I'll put the same question to John, because I mean, you're doing a lot of creative things, integrating stuff there. So it feels to me like there's still a lot of opportunity to get all these applications to harmonize and utilize this equipment, and in some cases reduce redundancy of what's being installed in the home. Is that the way you see things emerging?
Absolutely. I mean, there's let's be totally upfront. A lot of the demand response programs that exist today were kind of based on energy efficiency technology, and we're seeing a real push from battery storage systems participating into those demand response programs in a way that they haven't been, 3 to 5 years previous to today, and then you add on the new opportunity with EVs, and we have, the energy efficiency programmable control thermostats are kind of a tried and true, that the sort of the combination of those resources is still, I think, in an early days where you can say, look, we're gonna look at all of these different resources, but really battery storage can provide power, not just to the home, but to the grid. And there are a lot of regulatory policy transitions that are occurring right now to enable battery storage to fully recognize all the value that they could provide to the grid and to utilities. And so I think the technologies are here. I think what's really happening is we're seeing the evolution of the kind of the framework of value transmission to these devices, to these customers, and different business models kind of coming together that are combining these resources to figure out what is really the best path to enable access to these resources, to enable utilities to have access to these resources, while also being able to sort of simplify the complexities associated with this with software and different technologies. And I think that's going to continue easily into the next 3 to 5 to 10 years as more of these technologies come onto the grid and evolve, and these sort of pricing and value programs become more established.
All right, very good. Ezra, we've got a question on there on the optimizer. John Barlow just put that in. So maybe you want to respond to him offline in terms of 60 cycle, 50 cycle. But let me turn to Kevin Wolfe. A lot of the installations that you've shown and that you've talked about, they're in rural settings. What about urban settings for your technology? Is this a potential for rooftop installations? I mean, when I think of chaotic wind systems, urban systems with all the buildings in them are about as chaotic as you're going to get.
Yeah, the humans decided not to settle in windy areas. So, and the energy in the wind is the cube of the wind speed. So the difference between a 4 meters per second wind and an 8 meters per second wind, it's almost 3 times the amount of energy. So the energy is just too low in almost all urban areas. You know, places maybe like Tehachapi or out in, you know, the North Palm Springs area, but and Lompoc, but maybe the vast majority of urban areas are not in windy enough places to make it efficient. And our turbines, we're not competing for the rooftop model. We're at an industrial stage. Our biggest market, for example, are out in Cheyenne, Wyoming, where there's a Walmart distribution center with 6.7 meters per second at 15 meters above the ground. And they tried to put in a 1 megawatt machine, but they couldn't because setback easements were too tight on the property. But we could add 5 megawatts of our turbines to that same property. Or telecommunication sites on a ridgeline near Wrightwood, where the wind is 8.5 meters per second at 15 meters above the ground, and they rejected a tall turbine because the impacts on the Pacific Crest Trail. And the U.S. Forest Service is encouraging us to apply because they're just not going to be seen. So our products are really areas that are rural, windy, and where there's visual or setback problems for tall turbines.
All right, very good. I think one of our commenters in here were challenging you on people didn't settle where there's a lot of wind. They said Chicago.
Yeah, not windy enough. That's probably at the most 5 meters per second average. They just call it the Windy City, but it's really not compared to San Gorgonio Pass or the Montezuma Hills.
The triumph of marketing over reality. Very good. So let me just ask Peter Mackin, you're on the system here, and you usually are filled with good questions. Peter, is there anything you would like to ask the panel? You might be on mute. And Peter may be offline.
Okay, no, I'm here. I was just away from my desk. So, no, I did have one question. Sort of a combo question. I think it was in the chat there for these basically vehicle to grid, vehicle to home type use. Has anybody been looking at? I mean, if the vehicle manufacturer already says they can do it, you know, like Ford and Chevy, it's not a problem. But like legacy manufacturers, well, I guess I shouldn't say legacy, but like Tesla, for example. I haven't heard that you can do anything vehicle to grid with Tesla. Has anybody been looking at that?
So that's probably to Doug.
Yes, Doug.
Sure, I'd answer that question. Definitely. So the vehicles that plan to bidirectionally charge have to be enabled to bidirectionally charge based on their battery management system. So the battery management system dictates how deep you can discharge, how fast you can discharge, at what temperatures you can discharge. So there's actually a lot of controls and communication between the charger and the car to make sure that none of those environmental conditions are adverse to help ease any kind of degradation. In the end, your battery lifespan is a matter of the number of cycles. And so there are indeed increased cycles when you're using bidirectional charging, but they're not as deep or as frequent as, for example, a road trip or driving or daily driving, where from a stoplight, stop and go traffic, you're actually charging or discharging and charging your car based on acceleration and regenerative braking. So this is something that batteries are quite used to. When it comes to compatibility, this is a standards question. So the standards are in development now for cars that use CCS standard, like Ford F-150 and the Chevy Silverado. And so they're taking advantage of this to be able to offer it. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like backwards compatibility will be possible. But looking forward, almost all of the new models either have kind of battery management systems prepared for this eventuality or have outright announced it, like Hyundai Group with their vehicle to load, Ford, General Motors, and Volkswagen Group as well, saying that over-the-air updates will enable their vehicles to have this capability.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I guess one additional thought is, I mean, if usually a home charger doesn't have this capability, but if you have the ability to actually directly access the DC battery pack, then you don't have to worry about the in that case, like for a Tesla, it would just be software. If they would update their software, then you could do it. But that's probably not something you're looking at. But anyway, just another thought.
Yeah, we'd have to ask Elon.
Yeah.
Send
him a tweet.
You can contact him with a tweet, exactly. All right, well, I want to thank our panel today for just a terrific discussion as to what's going on. Kevin, Drew, John, Doug, and Ezra. So round of applause for this panel and everybody else who's been participating today. It's amazing what you can get done in 2 hours. We were somewhat skeptical we could cram all this in, but it's just been a highly informative conversation. So let me turn it back over to Thomas for some parting words, but thank to everybody. Thanks to Paul Lau for participating. Obviously, we're very hopeful and impressed with what SMUD is doing, and pleased to all the panelists. The city here is serious about becoming a leader in this area. So please, if there's any way that Clean Start, Startup Sac, or SMUD can help you get your innovations into the community and achieve SMUD's goal, we'd be quite interested in helping. Okay, over to you, Thomas. You might be on mute.
Yeah, can't hear you, Thomas.
Thank you very much, Gary. To close things out, I'm joined by my colleague, Laura Good, co-founder of Startup Sac. Startup Sac and Clean Start partnered to bring you the Sacramento Clean Tech Showcase. So Laura, some closing remarks?
Yes, so on behalf of Clean Start and Startup Sac, I'd like to thank all of our presenters and panelists for participating in today's event. Your contributions have been instrumental in moving these important discussions forward. So also big thank you to SMUD for underwriting this important work, and a special thank you to Heidi Pyle and Jim Alves from SMUD for their roles in making this showcase happen. And then I also want to thank all of you who joined us today. The showcase is intended to be a kickoff for further discussions and collaborations to build a synergistic and co-creative relationship between SMUD and our region's innovators. Thomas?
All right, thank you. The conversations today were recorded and we'll edit them down to make them really impactful, and you can find them on Clean Start's YouTube channel, and we'll also share them through our other networks. And the conversations we're going to have after this are going to be smaller, deeper dives into themes and topics discussed here, with in-person, two-way roundtable discussions during Clean Start's meetups and perspectives. These discussions will enable startups and innovators to hear directly from SMUD staff about their needs and what they're working on. Stay tuned to Clean Start and Startup Sac's media channels for more information about these upcoming events. Make sure you connect with us at CleanStart.org and startupsac.org. We have events, happy hours, perspectives, and follow-up discussions. So hopefully see you all there in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And bye.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Thomas and
I'm going
Gary.
to stop the recording now.
Go ahead. Stop and
I believe I've stopped. And let me